Welcome back to another edition of the MSF Podcast, everybody. As usual, I'm your host, Jerod Morris, and I'm joined today by a guest that we have had before on the podcast, and we are very excited to have again, Robert Littal from Black Sports Online. And I brought Robert on today because I want to talk about one topic very specific, and it's a topic that's gaining a lot of headlines around the country today, and that is the name Roger Goodell. And of course, Roger Goodell is making headlines, perhaps dubious headlines, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the NFL's decision to allow Terrelle Pryor to be in the supplemental draft, but at the same time suspend him for the first 5 games. And then also some comments that Michael Vick made to GQ, which he apparently has since rescinded, but which some people, especially you, Rob, don't necessarily think, or you think that might not have been all of Mike Vick's doing. So let's start out. Let's break down the Pryor decision. Let's break down this Vick story, and then I want to talk kind of on a macro level about Roger Goodell and the burning question of does he have too much power. So let's start out with Terrelle Pryor. You're an Ohio State guy. Obviously, Terrelle Pryor was had to leave Ohio State. His status as an entrant in the supplemental draft has been up in the air. Like I said, he is in, but he's suspended for 5 games. What did you think when you heard that decision?
Well, first let me say that I think Roger Goodell is a very smart individual, very, very intelligent, very bright. He knew that he had Terrelle Pryor between a rock and a hard place. And this was his way of kind of appeasing the NCAA, letting them think at least that the NFL is really trying to help them with the problems that they are having. If you're Terrelle Pryor, you don't really have a lot of leverage. Goodell had, once again, the power to keep him out of the supplemental draft completely and make him, go back into the NFL draft in 2012. If you're Terrelle Pryor and, your options are either go back into the 2012 draft or take a 5-game suspension knowing that you're not going to really play this year anyway to get into the supplemental draft, to get a year of service in the NFL, he really didn't have much of a choice. And I think Roger Goodell knew this, and this is kind of what I mean about exerting his power. The NFLPA would have fought the case, but it would have bled into the season, and he wouldn't have been eligible, for the supplemental draft. So it kind of put Pryor in a very difficult spot, but once again shows you that the commissioner knows how to use his influence and power very much like the mafia. That's why I'm calling him Roger Goodell Gotti now, because he wields his power almost like a mafia boss, to be honest with you.
And I guess for all intents and purposes, the 5-game suspension is somewhat irrelevant because it's not like Terrelle Pryor was really going to play anyway. A lot of people think he just needs to get into camp and just make a team. So this isn't like, Cam Newton being suspended for 5 games, where he has a chance to start. I think what's been interesting and the topic that people are bringing up is this a sign of things to come, and where does it stop? Because if you can suspend Terrelle Pryor for 5 games for something that is NCAA related, not NFL related at all, well, what if something comes out about the Cam Newton situation from last year? Can he be retroactively suspended? Is this going to be something moving forward that the NFL is going to start doing now, as you kind of said, to work together with the NCAA? How do you see that playing out?
It's a very slippery slope. I'm hoping that this is just kind of a one-time situation for public relations, because like you said, if you really start digging deep into it, using his way of thinking or the way that they presented it about Terrelle Pryor, then what do you do about Reggie Bush? What do you do about the 70 to 100 Miami players that have been caught up? What about Pete Carroll, who knowingly left the program knowing that it was going down the drain? What happens when players are eligible for the regular draft, but, they bail out of college early because they know that they've done certain things, they're under scrutiny because of the NCAA? Do you start suspending them before they get drafted into the NFL in the regular draft? It's a very slippery slope, and legally, I really wonder, can this even be done? I think it was done with Terrelle Pryor because Pryor didn't really have much of a choice, and if they would have really fought it, I don't think he could have been suspended. So a lot of people or a lot of players, a lot of agents wouldn't take this as well as Terrelle Pryor because of the situation that they're in. So I'm hoping it's a one-time thing, because if it becomes something like that, then once again, as the power grows and the mafia gets bigger, it's who's going to be able to control it, who's going to be able to stop it.
Yeah. Now you say, in this article that you have, I have it pulled up right here about Terrelle Pryor. You say, quote, Roger Goodell, in my opinion, has way too much power. So, and I've read a couple of articles recently that have talked about how the NFLPA really, they lost an opportunity during the negotiations of the new CBA to knock Goodell down a little bit, to remove a little bit of the power that he has. But it almost seems like it's almost like he's emboldened and has more power. Do you see that as kind of a lost opportunity for the NFLPA, and how can this power that Goodell has be reined in, if at all?
That should have been their number one priority. I understand it's all about money, and they wanted to make sure they were still getting their piece of the money. But the second thing is that power, that universal power, just judge, jury, executioner that he still has, now he doesn't have to be nice anymore. He doesn't have to placate the James Harrisons of the world anymore. They have a 10-year locked-in deal, and he's not going anywhere. So when he's challenged, there's really no wiggle room for anyone, to challenge him. The owners don't care because, they don't have that type of relationship with the players anyway. The owners don't care about Terrelle Pryor or what's going on with Michael Vick or what happened in college. All they care about is how much their bottom dollar is, and only if it affects maybe that specific team. But as a whole, it doesn't really affect them. So Goodell knows that he has it. This is the one thing that he has, the one thing that he can hoard over. It's his golden ticket. And he really seems to me at times that he abuses, the power. There's really no reason for Terrelle Pryor to be suspended, if not only just to show that Roger Goodell could do this, to someone, to put the fear of God, I guess, into other college players, to do this. But to be honest with you, I don't think they fear Goodell. They kind of loathe Goodell, and you're right. It was definitely a mistake on the NFLPA's part, which I think did a lot of good work, for the collective bargaining agreement, not to get some sort of arbitration system, some sort of checks and balances, because now this guy is, the uniform boss of all of these players, and they have a real disdain, for that.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the NFLPA, who do you think can rock the fedora better, you or D. Smith?
Well, D. Smith is older, so it's more of an old man rock. So when I rock the fedora, I bring out the twaddles and things of that nature. I'm not young, but I'm not so old. I'm like at the perfect age where I can still deal with the 21-year-olds, but I can go up to a cougar level as well. Yeah. I'm like at the perfect age right now. I'm like, everybody's coming at me when I throw the fedora on.
Yeah. All right. Well, getting back to Goodell for a second, talking about kind of this unchecked power, in the Pryor situation, again, he's letting him in the supplemental draft, suspending him for 5 games, but at the end of the day, this isn't going to really affect anything on the field. And I think more people have been focusing on this today. To me, the biggest story of the day was a little nugget that was tucked into an article about Michael Vick that came out in GQ. It was written by Will Leach, a guest that we've had on the MSF podcast before, of course, the founder of Deadspin. Everybody knows Will. And in the article, Vick talks about the dog fighting and kind of looking back on the reaction of the media and people. And, I guess, anytime Michael Vick says anything about dog, people are going to view it through their own context. And I personally, I had a huge problem, obviously, with all the dog fighting stuff. I had no problem with any of Vick's quotes. I thought, like you said, he was real, he was honest. And, so to me, there was nothing there. But what I thought was very important, and I'm going to read these 2 paragraphs from this article, because I think when you talk about unchecked power and that power actually bleeding onto the field, to me, there's a story here. And here's the quote, okay? So this is quoting Michael Vick. I think I can say now, because it's not going to hurt anybody's feelings, and it's the truth, I didn't want to come to Philadelphia. Being the third-team quarterback is nothing to smile about. Cincinnati and Buffalo were better options, unquote. Those 2 teams wanted him and would have allowed him to start, but after meeting with Commissioner Roger Goodell and other reps from the NFL, Vick was convinced and granted league approval to sign with Philly. And this is quoting Vick again. And I commend and thank them because they put me in the right situation, unquote. Now, when I first read that, I read that as basically the NFL and Roger Goodell guiding Michael Vick from Cincinnati or Buffalo, both, two franchises that could use a quarterback, could use a new image, a spark, and to Philadelphia. Now, a statement has later come out where Vick kind of clarified it and couches the statements and yada yada. But I want to get your take. What did you think when you first read that, and what do you think now of this Vick coming out now and trying to clarify these statements and kind of take some of the strength away from them?
Well, my first thought, and I even said it yesterday while we were on Twitter, is that I wish Michael Vick would stop talking in regards to the past. I mean, you want to talk about football, you want to talk about moving forward, any type of positive work that you're doing, that's fine. It seems like when he talks about the past, regardless if he's being honest or not, he always puts his foot in his mouth with something. And this seems like to be the big thing that came out of it. I believe the GQ statement 100%. I don't believe necessarily the statement that he just made. The statement that he just made doesn't even say that what he said before is untrue. It just kind of, goes around it to try to leave Goodell out of it.
Yeah.
The bigger problem, like you're talking about, is this. If you're the Bengals and you're the Bills and you're suffering and you have quarterback situations that are unstable right now, and you know that Michael Vick was interested in coming to your team, and your commissioner, the person that works for you, basically told him in no uncertain terms, if you want back into the league, I suggest you sign with the Philadelphia Eagles. Once again, we're talking about Roger Goodell, where he has the position of power over a player. It wasn't like Michael Vick had a lot of options, and he needed Goodell to let him back in because it was no arbitration system. Goodell held all the cards, held his future in his hand. He could have suspended him for another year. He could have not let him back in the league, period. And a lot of people would have been cool with that. Knowing that he held that power, Michael Vick has no choice. And by him saying, I think I can say this now, because I don't think people would think it's a big deal, it shows you how naive he is about certain things, but also tells you that how he felt at that time, that he had, no choice. Now, it worked out well for him in the long run, but basically what this is saying is when Goodell has this type of power, when he has this type of control over a situation or a player or an individual, that he's willing to use that to the best interest of himself, not necessarily for that player or for the NFL, to be honest with you.
I mean, if he let me just play devil's advocate for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he looks at the situations in Cincinnati and Buffalo, and, I'm sure, knowing inside information, knowing things that he knows, and he looks at those and sees them as bad situations for Vick, knowing how high profile of a guy Vick is, how important, Vick's first year in the league is going to be coming back, and he looks at going to Philly with no pressure, a strong head coach, a strong infrastructure. If he views that as better, can you kind of look at it with the ends justify the means type rationale to say, maybe we do need a commissioner who has the kind of foresight to put him in a good position, or is this just too much dictating what's going on, almost like it's, the WWF?
Well, it was good advice. I mean, there's no question that it was good advice. You can also say, suspending Terrelle Pryor, teaches him, has a bigger overall lesson to the college, players as well. So it's not necessarily the decisions that he's making or the advice that he's giving is altogether wrong or evil or bad or anything. It's just that when you're dealing in that type of situation, you have 32 teams. When you're favoring one team over another, and we're all supposed to be equal, then that's a problem. I mean, if me and you are in a company, and for whatever reason, because I like Tupac and you like Biggie, and the boss likes Biggie, you get kind of the boss persuades you to like better leads or a better a better situation within the company. That may be all fine and good, just because of his personal perception, but and overall of the company, how that's going to make morale feel. And I think that's why you need someone, if he's going to have all that power, to be unbiased, to be fair, to call it straight down the middle, where it's obvious he's doing what his personal feelings are, as opposed to maybe just calling it straight down the middle and doing what's best, for business. And best for business would have been to tell Michael Vick, we're going to reinstate you conditionally or whatever it is. You make your decision of where you want to go. And it's your responsibility to know if you have any screw-ups, that you're gone. That wasn't something for him to decide. That was something for Michael Vick as a grown man to have the responsibility to make the proper decision. If he did not want to go to Philadelphia, he should have been able to make that decision, not Roger Goodell.
I just wonder. I mean, do you think that we'll hear any type of outcry from from anyone significant in Buffalo or Cincinnati about something like this, or is this is Goodell reaching a David Sternian level of where if he doesn't want something to say something, he can just give an evil glare in a direction, and people know not to say anything? I mean, is that kind of what we're approaching here with Goodell?
I think so. I really think so. I don't think he has the David Stern dictatorship yet, because David Stern has been, the commissioner of the NBA for a very long time. But I do think with this new collective bargaining agreement, knowing that it's 10 years in before anything can be done, I think he is trying to become the next, David Stern. We might have to call him Roger Stern Jr.
Yeah.
Because I think he would like that type of position. He would like to be seen, that way.
Is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, I know at the end of your Michael Vick article, it says, let me pull this up here again. Speaking of Roger Goodell, he is making up rules and punishment as he goes along, and at some point he is going to truly overstep and cast a dark cloud over the NFL. Mark my words. What do you see as the type of situation, or the type of decision that he could make that would be, overstepping his bounds? And if he does become a Stern-like figure, is that necessarily a bad thing for the NFL?
I think at some point he's going to get challenged by either a player or an agent or something, and information is going to come to light about things that we don't know about publicly. If Michael Vick never says this, we don't know about it. We're not exactly sure what went on behind the scenes with Terrelle Pryor, even though I do have people telling me that he had an either or type of choice. I think there's a lot more that's going on than what we know about. And as we have found out with this new age media, it only takes one person, one snitch, one something to blow the whole thing up. And I think if his head starts getting too big and he starts to think that he's untouchable, everybody can be touched, as I was once told. So we'll see. But I do think if he continues to go around this road, that someone's going to bring something to light. And it's going to have a damaging effect, on him and on the NFL.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story because, you think back to when Goodell came in, and obviously one of the biggest stories when he came in was all of the problems the NFL was having with off-field content. And I think, if I remember correctly, he was pretty much universally applauded for coming in, being strong, making some taking swift, decisive action. And it's almost like from that very first decision, he just kind of hasn't stopped, and he's just kind of, kept making decisions and going a little bit further and a little bit further. And, and you're right. I mean, there's a 10-year contract now, and he doesn't have to be Mr. Nice Guy. He doesn't have to placate anybody, except for the owners. As long as the owners and I guess, the TV networks and the advertisers are happy. I mean, those are really the people that he answers to, isn't it?
That's correct. I mean, I think he put on a very nice face during these negotiations because he knew that his career long term was going to be based off if they missed any type of game. So he didn't want that to happen. He got the best deal that I guess that they thought they can get together. And now, I mean, it's just like, getting a promotion and you're your own boss now. Or your boss, or you're sleeping with the boss's daughter, or something like that. Something where that you have a good standing and nothing can happen to you. It's hard not to become power hungry or get a big head or have your ego go out of control if you don't have anybody. I equate it to be like a rapper. Like, who's telling Jay-Z no? Who's telling Kanye West no?
Yeah.
Who are the yes men? Or the no men, as they say. Who are the ones that are going to go up to him and say, hey, this is, too far? Does he have someone around him to do that? The owners, in my mind, are strictly money-based, and now that they have their deal done and they got a little extra money, for now, they're happy. Now, if he embarrasses them down the road, will that change? Does a Jerry Jones or a Robert Kraft, step in? I could definitely see that happening. But as of right now, they're letting him puff out his chest and just kind of sitting back and letting him take the heat because the heat's now off of them.
Yeah. Well, Rob, man, I appreciate the time. Excellent perspective as always. The website, of course, is blacksportsonline.com. You can follow Rob at BLK Sports Online on Twitter. What kind of exciting NFL coverage you have coming up for this season?
Well, we're going to do the NFL preview, of course, coming up. And then, we have the live tweeting of all the games because I watch all the games every Sunday and everything. And we also going to be doing a Monday morning quarterback podcast where I break down each game and give fantasy tips as well for the following week.
Okay, and are you going to make me actually come take your cornbread this year, or you just want to mail that to me before the season starts in fantasy?
Well, we would like, this time for you not to send an international traveler's check for your sightseeing. But yeah, I will be taking your cornbread because, my daughter has a lot of expensive taste, and it's around Christmas time when I take the cornbread, so I can go ahead and pay her off. So, yeah, I appreciate you.
All right, man. Well, hey, have a great day. Thanks again for the time, man.
All right. See you later.
All right, later.